Hello, I'm Catherine Clark, and welcome to a special Remembrance Day edition of Beyond Politics. Over the past several weeks, I have had the privilege and the honor to interview 4 veterans who have served in either the Second World War, the Korean War, or in Afghanistan. Now it's my pleasure to introduce the interview with Nelson Langevin, a man who joined the military when he was a teenager and who delivered our troops to the shores of Dieppe, an experience that scars him to this day. Welcome to Beyond Politics. It's a great pleasure to have you here. Tell me about how you became involved in the war. You joined the Navy, am I correct?
Yes. Well, I was 16 when the war began, and some of my friends were joining up. They were a little older than I was, and I wanted to do the same thing, of course. It was our duty to do it, and we're all like sheep, aren't we? We all want to follow, so I'm no different than anybody else. So I tried to join.
When you were 16?
When I was 16 in the Navy, but then the Navy wanted to see my birth certificate. And then they said, we'll take you on as a boy seaman. If your mother, I didn't have a father, my father died in 1929. If your mother gives you a note saying that she's in the Corps, my mother wouldn't do that. So a little later on, when I was 17, I joined the Army. There, they didn't ask you for a birth certificate. Told them I was 18 because you were supposed to be. And then later on, I still wanted to be in the Navy. So I asked for a transfer, see if it would work to go to the Navy. And sure enough, they transferred me to the Navy. So I figured I had it made because that's what I wanted to do, because I always wanted to travel. I see what was on the other side of the hill. And so I got into the Navy, but the place we were being trained at on Queen Street here in Ottawa burnt down. So then they sent us to Montreal. Well, that was really something. The biggest city in Canada at the time and that. So, yeah, I had quite a bit of a time. I learned how to drink and learned a lot of other things. But then they transferred us again for more training in Halifax. And this is what I was telling you a little while ago, that this is where I found out that the Canadian Navy would only go halfway across the Atlantic.
Really?
With the convoys.
And then what happens?
Well, the British would take over the convoys, and the Canadians would come back to Canada. Now, I figured, well, all I'm going to see is water. And I figured that was going to be for the rest of the war, although it changed later on, but at the time I figured that was going to be it. So anyways, I volunteered with 79 other fellows to go with the British Navy. And it's only when we got overseas that they told us what we had volunteered for. And it was what they called combined operations. This was under Lord Louis Mountbatten at the time. And it was to be on these barges to go on enemy shores. And this is what I did during the war. Our training was done in Scotland in a place called Inverary, but they named it, of all places, HMS Quebec.
Did they really?
Yeah.
So did it feel a little bit like home, or was it nothing like home?
No, it's like, there were little hills there and stuff like that, and sometimes it would be raining most of the time. You were wet. We thought we'd all be sick, because everything was wet. Your bedding was wet. Because the humidity, yeah. But nobody got sick or anything like that. So it was nothing like home. But anyways, that's where we did a lot of training because it was different and made you jump over things and crawl underneath things and things like that. Show you how to use a knife, show you how to use a gun and a machine gun and a Tommy gun. Oh yeah, we had the whole shebang there.
And when did you see active duty?
At Dieppe. That was in 1942. Yeah. Well, there was action before that because, you know, I was in an air raid. And on the ship I was on, we were attacked by some Messerschmitts. We had a near miss. We thought we were sinking. Everybody wanted to jump overboard. I remember at the time.
What did
so
you
that
do?
was exciting, but passed by.
You didn't have to jump?
No, we we made it into port, and then later on, the first really action was Dieppe. Left from a place called New Haven, and these ships called Eureka. These boats, I should say, these barges, Eureka. We crossed the channel, and this was the first really action that I saw, and it wasn't something that I like to think about it, because there was, you know, nearly 1,000 Canadians died. Yeah.
It's obviously still difficult for you to talk about even now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you remember what you felt that morning?
Well, we didn't know where we were going. They weren't saying where we were going or anything, you know. It's only later on when we were halfway there where we were going, where we were going to go. And it always frightened me more before I got there. Yeah, it's funny. Than when I actually was there, you know, from when I can remember. But then the same year, we went to North Africa, invaded Algeria with the Americans, the American Rangers. The same year, but at the end of the year, just comparatively speaking, there was nothing there, hardly anything at all. It was a pushover, you know, compared to that. And then we went back to England after, we were there for about a month, I suppose. And the next year, like I said, I had joined the Navy to see the world. The next year, sure enough, we went right around Africa. We stopped in Sierra Leone, and then Cape Town and Durban, and then we stopped in, I think, a place called Oran or in Yemen. You know? Then we went up the Red Sea, and we stayed in Egypt for a while, and with the British outfit, but anyways, they were British soldiers. They weren't soldiers, Marines, the Royal Marines. They were living in tents there, and so we lived with them for a little while. And then we went to Cairo, and we went to Suez, and then to Alexandria. So I saw quite a bit. But from Alexandria, we left on a Liberty ship to invade Sicily. And after Sicily, they sent us to Malta for a rest period. And then we went back, maybe 10 days later or so.
What were you doing there? Can you describe what you were doing in Sicily?
In Sicily, we'd unload the soldiers, and then we'd help unload but we'd stay on the beach. And of course, they tried to get us off the beach. And I think the first 3 days we were getting strafed and bombed every day, nearly every hour on the hour. And it's a funny thing that I got friendly with one of the crew members there on the American ship, and he was Spaniard. He was Spanish, and we exchanged a little bit of, the Spanish and the French, like mano for man, and dedo for brazo, all this stuff. So we got friendly, and I teach him how to say it in French. So he said, when I left, bring me back a gift, a memento. Try and bring me back a memento. So all the time I was there, I tried. I couldn't find anything. I'd go into houses, and I wasn't going to bring him a chair or anything. So finally I found a booby trap that the Germans or the Italians had put there on a tree. And I dismantled it. When I think about it now, I must have been crazy. I took it off the tree. I figured, hey, he's going to be happy with that.
And you dismantled the booby trap. Yeah. You're lucky you didn't kill yourself.
Yeah, it could have blown up in my face, you know what I mean? And it was just stuck in a tree. There was all little... anyways, I took it off. And, I was so glad. And like I said, there was an awful lot of bombing going on and the strafing and all this stuff. And everybody was nervous. Everybody said. So when I got back on the ship, I had this thing for him. And I was looking for him, and he's up on the bridge. So I went up on the bridge, and there was several people on the bridge, and all looking to see if they'd see any planes coming, and so everybody was nervous. So I called them, and I said, look, I got something for you. Oh, I go, good, thank you. He's Grandma, but he was still looking about to see if there was any planes coming, And what is it? And I told him, it's a booby trap. Right away, he took it over and he chucked it.
Oh, after all the time you'd spent tearing it apart.
Oh, I was mad as hell. After I did, I wasn't friendly with this fellow anymore. It's only later on when I thought about it, it was really ridiculous to me to think that. I don't know what the hell I was thinking about.
Well, you were at war. You talked about the fact that he was looking up at the sky and that you were constantly under fire. It must have really affected your nerves.
Yes, it definitely did. Because a lot of times these things would blow up, of course, I'd lay down because I remember the shrapnel, and you could hear it blowing in the air, I'd put up my head, if I could still hear, I wouldn't get up. And I'd wait until I couldn't hear anything. My hearing was pretty good in those days.
And one of the things we were wanting to get a little more information about was leave, when you went on leave. What was that like? Fun.
Oh, yes. Well, I usually went to, of course, in England, I usually went to Scotland, to Glasgow, because it was more open. And the people I found, the people were friendlier, and most of them were no bigger than I was. Yeah, it's funny. They were all pretty well short. So, to me, this was a thing. And I was kind of shy, but I've got to admit that after Dieppe, I said to myself, surely I'm going to die. So it's silly to be shy. And I wasn't shy anymore. My shyness left me. But like I said, this is where I learned to drink. And most of the time, though, I drank too much.
Were you ever injured?
Well, I fell, and I broke my spine.
No.
Yeah, they tell me I'd be a little taller if it hadn't happened. But I slipped and fell, you know, it wasn't, because then they sent me to hospital. And, I was nearly a year in the hospital. And then, of course, I was discharged, medically unfit. And, but one thing, by that time I was 21. And I was allowed to vote, and I was allowed to drink. I always find that funny. That you could go to war, but you couldn't drink or you couldn't vote. They've changed that since.
I know it's hard for you to talk about, but you offer a very important memory of why we honor our veterans when you talk about your experience at Dieppe. Are you able to tell me a little bit more about what happened that day, about what happened when you saw the beach, and did you go into the water and up onto the...
Well, what our job was is to put the soldiers on the ground, and get off as soon as we could. But then it was to go back and get some. We got some, but we didn't get all that many. That it does affect me. Think, and it's funny. It didn't bother me like that at the time. I don't know why it bothers me now, and I can't seem to take it out of my. I guess I must have retained it for so long, I suppose. No.
What happens on Remembrance Day, as we get closer to Remembrance Day and people start talking about veterans and the war? Does it come back to you then?
No, because Remembrance Day for me is the First World War. I guess it's because when I was a young kid, it was for the First World War. And the more you learn about what happened during the First World War, the more I feel for these fellows that went. I think most of us wouldn't have been able to do what, when you read about these things like the First World War, I don't know if most of us would have been able to do what they did during then. So to me, it's the First World War. That's what November 11 means to me, not the Second World War.
When you came home, you were 21? You said you were 21 when you were medically discharged?
Yeah.
You joined when you were 16?
Yeah.
So that was... Well...
I joined when I was 17.
Okay. So you were 17, and you saw a lot in those 4 years.
Yeah.
Did you come home a different person than when you left?
Oh, yeah.
How?
Well, I knew how to drink. I didn't drink before I left the home. No, but I drank, and I drank too much. I drank an awful lot. That's all I wanted to do. I didn't want to work or anything like that. And, so for a whole year, yeah, I'm not a very nice person when I think about it. And my mother, you know, she wasn't saying anything, but I was living with my mother still, and I wasn't even thinking of getting a job or anything, and I was borrowing money, and I had no intentions of paying it back. Yeah, so a few things happened. I remember walking down Reader Street, and I met a fellow that I knew, I went to school with. He had been in the army, but he was begging. He wanted a quarter. That had something to do with my thinking, because I was saying hello to him, you know. And Holly was putting his hand out and saying, "Hey, buddy, can you spare a quarter?" And I said, "Hey, it's me, it's Nelson. How you doing, you know?" And he didn't realize what I was saying. You know, for Christ's sake, he says, "Can you spare a quarter?" You know. I figured, oh my, when I left him, I gave him a quarter and I left. But I thought, you know, if I keep on going, this might happen to me. And so it got me to reflect a little bit on my drinking and that. And then I got married.
That'll put your life in order.
No. But after she was pregnant and that after a while. So I thought it was about time for me to start working. So I started working for Veterans Affairs. Being a veteran, they more or less had to give you a job in the government thing, and that's
what you ended up doing.
Yeah. So I worked for Veterans Affairs, then external.
We've heard so much recently about soldiers who are suffering from post-traumatic stress, and you can see your own memories are lasting, and they stay with you, and they cause you some emotion. How do you feel when you think about other people who've gone through the war and who are still living with these memories now, including the young soldiers?
I don't know how to feel about that, really and honestly, because I honestly don't know what these fellows have gone through, you know. Now, it affects me a little bit like that, but it didn't affect me like it's some of these fellows. So really, I have no opinion about that. Really, it's beyond my comprehension. That, I guess some of us can go through certain things and where others can't. But of course, you know, before the war, we went through the Depression. That was a terrible time, for me anyways, and for a lot of other people as well. You know, some people in Canada died of starvation during the Depression. So that might have had something to do with the way we felt. All of a sudden, there was money around and jobs and all this stuff when the war started. So that's what got us out of the Depression. But really, even though I was 15, 16, because I can still remember that I thought it would never end, you know. I was getting, to tell you, desperate at the time, and I was doing things that I shouldn't have been doing. And it would have gone worse if, I'm sure, if the war hadn't started. So I think there must have been others like myself. I don't know what would have happened in a later time. So, in a sense, the war was a godsend, you know.
You talked about the fact that your mom wouldn't sign the paper that would have allowed you to join the Navy. How did she react when she found out that you'd gone and joined the Army?
That I can't remember. I guess she felt, well, it's done. And I suppose, you can see, like I said a little while ago, my father died in 1929. So there was 5 of us, and she just kept us all together. And she worked, you know, and she used to do offices in the morning. You know, get up at 5 o'clock to go and do.
Do you mean clean them?
Clean offices, government offices. She had works like that. She didn't have much education. I don't think she has any at all, because I remember when we started going to school, and she tried to read the paper and that, and she'd ask us what some of the words meant, you know what I mean? But she taught herself to read English and French. Then later on, she sold corsets. So she had to figure out the sizes of things, you know, and that. And so she must have been a very bright woman to be able to do things like that, really. Yeah. But then she died, she was 52.
It's a life of hard work.
Right?
It's a life of hard work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it was. And to keep us all together, you know what I mean? And I was, like I said a little while ago, I was no help. You know, you only think about that later on, eh? And, well, that's why when I joined up, though, I made sure I had an insurance. They sold insurance for people going abroad. It was special, you know. It was only $1,000, but $1,000 in those days was quite a bit of money. And I took that out, and I signed over a portion of my pay, figuring, well, I guess I'd better start paying a little something. And yeah, that's the only thing I did, though. Seeing that, because I figured, well, yeah, you go to war, you might not come back.
I really appreciate that you would take the time today to speak to us. Thank you very much, and thank you for your service.
Thank you. Nice talking to you.